I'm Eric Wolf, and my experience in business peer groups has changed my life, especially my membership in Vistage, one of the world's largest CEO advisory groups. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Vistage speaker on the power of marketing. This podcast is dedicated to the people who make those experiences possible, the peer group chairs. Every episode, I interview a Vistage chair who has dedicated their time to helping entrepreneurs like me succeed. Today, my guest is Mr. Chet Tart, and Chet is a Vistage chair in sunny Florida. And to get started, I would really love to kind of hear your story about your journey from being a business leader. I know that you worked in business, you worked in media. I know that you have you've collaborated on books. What takes you from there to being a Vistage chair, and how did that look for you?
You know, being a Vistage chair was an accident. I got to take you back, because if you were to write a book about me, it would be going through life with an accident. First of all, I went to the wrong college. And being at the wrong college actually was a great advantage, because the people I met there helped me through my life. And I tell you how I got into media. So I was going to this college in Miami, and I was sweeping floors and answering phones to pay for the college. And one of the guys that saw me said, you know, of all the people that work here, you seem to be the most focused on getting better. And I said, yeah, I like to get better. He said, what would you like to do? And sarcastically, I said, you know, I really like to host a Tonight Show one day, but I don't think Carson's quitting. So he said, you want to get into media? And I said, yeah, I'd love to get into media. So he said, I'm going to have you go down to the radio station, and I'm going to introduce you to one of the guys there, and maybe you can do an internship, which was great. I mean, that's all I wanted to do was get into media. So I was an intern. I was a producer for a talk show, and the talk show was at night. And after 2 weeks there, the guy called me in and said, Chet, what do you want to do in life? I said, I like to do what you're doing. He said, okay, you've been good. I'll help you out. You got to get out of here. There's nothing in Florida. I'm going to send you up to Boston, and I'm going to have you pick out a school. I mean, it's either Syracuse University or Emerson College. And I said, sir, could you pick it out for me? He said, yes, I'll get you to Emerson College. I think it's a great college. Well, his name was Larry King. So he was my first mentor.
That's a heck of a mentor to have.
That's why I tell you, everything through life even gets better. So I went up to Emerson, went to the school, and my classmates were unbelievable. The guy next to me in psychology class helped me because I was driving my car from New Jersey, where I lived, up to Boston, and I had nowhere to park it. And he said, you can park at my kids, my family's house. My mom and dad live in Brighton, and you can take the Green Line back. But you got to do me a favor. I said, what's that? He said, you got to take me to the comedy clubs on the weekends, because I have no way of getting there. I said, okay, I'll do that for you. His name was Jay Leno, so he was in my psychology class. So you see how,
and you thought that you wouldn't have an in with Carson, and little did you know.
Little did I know a lot. The guy upstairs from me, I was friends with, and he wanted to be a writer, and that was tough, because everyone who went to Hollywood to be a writer really slept in their car, and so did Kevin. Kevin slept in his car, and years later, I don't think he has to work a day in his life, because he wrote for the TV show Friends. So anyway, I got into Vistage, because I'm telling you these stories because I could have to condense it down. I got a job in New York City at a giant company as a consultant, and that's because the guy upstairs at the wrong college, in Biscayne College in Miami, knew his girlfriend worked for Blair Radio. Blair Radio got me a job as a consultant. As I was consulting radio stations around the country, which was about maybe 125 of them in the 5 years I was there, one of the guys that I coached had owned the radio station. He had quit and became a Vistage chair. And he said to me, you'd be a great Vistage chair because that's what you did for a living for all these radio stations for the years you were there. And I said, what is Vistage? So I didn't know what it was. So I looked into it, and sure enough, that's what I did for a living.
And sure enough, you fit the job description, and you said, I'm going to give this a shot.
Yeah. And I love it. I love the guys that are in my group. I want them all to grow. And that's what they did. And we're still growing, and I haven't lost them in 3 years, so I haven't lost them. I've been a Vista chair for 3 years now.
That's amazing. And so Larry King and Jay Leno and now Vistage.
Well, there's more to that story, but I won't bore you. But I always say you go through life, you don't know who people are, you're nice to everybody, you are on a road to learn. And that's all I wanted to do is, how do I get better? How do I get better? How do I get better? And I met so many great people along the way. I'll tell you a side story. There is, during the 90s, when I owned radio stations, and what I thought I'd do, I don't know where this idea came from, is that there were so many these books coming out. Tony Robbins wrote a book. There was another book by Stephen Covey. What I did is I called up the publisher and I said, listen, I'd like to interview these guys and put them on the radio and interview them. But I didn't really. What I did is interview them and taped them for myself. So I would call the guys up, and sure enough, they set a time and I would talk to them. And so during that time, it was a plethora of people who wrote these great books on how to get better, from Jim Collins to Tony Robbins to, I have all the books here that I've saved, some great people. Never got on the radio for the interview because it was mine. Now you can't do any of that. It's too much. There's too much transparency.
Well, real quick, just as an aside to your side. So you worked in the radio business for a lot of years, and now the radio business is different. It's we have terrestrial radio like we did before, but now we also have satellite radio, and we have podcasting, and we have all of these ways now that people are distributing audio content. Even audiobooks have become this thing at a level that I'm not sure anybody ever thought. How does that all strike you as somebody who grew up in this business?
I think it's phenomenal. I think it's great. The amount of knowledge and the amount of information is like a fire hose. Where I just went back and told you about my interviews with these guys that wrote a book. I think it was difficult for me to get better because I had to work at it. Now I could punch on YouTube. I can get somebody on YouTube. I can get somebody on Spotify. Podcast I listen to all the time. I do think that terrestrial radio has been hurt. I got out of it maybe 5 years ago, and it used to be a bucket where I could just get money because everyone wanted to be on the radio. Right. Testimonials were good. Radio worked. We're still in the same format. We still do the same thing. And I think today, people are doing their own playlist. The music variety has changed. I'm watching my grandkids and what they're listening to. I'm watching my daughter, what they listen to. And also, our lives are snippets. Where before we don't even listen to a whole song anymore. Right.
It's amazing how much has changed in the last 25 years. The whole world is different. Even the idea of talk radio. My dad used to listen to a lot of talk radio, and even that's different from the perspective that you've got these podcasts now, and you can, he would just turn on the radio and he would listen to whoever was talking about whatever, but now you can actually decide exactly, niches within niches that you want to hear about and that you're interested in hearing somebody's opinion on. and you can have that. You can have that on demand, and it's incredible. But we have digressed. Tell me about your group. You have one thing that's interesting about your group. You mentioned that you have a lot of younger members.
Yes, my members range from 30 to 54, and younger members who are growing their business, who are incredibly driven to get better. And so not only is it exciting for me, but it's a challenge for me because I want to make sure that each meeting that we have is a different experience. So, I'm constantly learning. How do we do better decision making? How do we do better executive association? What kind of speakers can I bring in? Also, my retreats have been a little bit different. Just last month, I took the group up to West Point for leadership training and
Oh,
physical
wow.
training. So they had a whole different experience. I also did a triad with 3 other Vistage groups so they would get an idea what other chairs are like and what other members are like. So, like, I'm coming up in September and I'm having one of my members actually be the speaker because he's a finance guy, also an accountant. And I want to prepare for 2025's great business plan. And I want to talk, and we just tear down everyone's business plan, not in a negative way, but in a good way to make sure that we're on track. Is that core value still the same? Are those numbers going to be the same? What's going to attack you? And each one of my hosts I work with constantly, I said, you presented it this way last time. What can we do different this time? So, I'm really engaged with them. And in order to be in the group, you gotta want to grow and you gotta want to learn.
You mentioned speakers, and that's interesting to me as not only a Vistage member but a Vistage speaker. So 2 questions. What's the best speaker that you've ever booked? And what was the message of that? And then the follow-up that I would love to ask is what you take into account when you're looking for speakers.
Let me do the second one first. I ask the members what is needed, and if they can't answer me, I pay attention to what they're saying. For next year, I am bringing in a lot of people dealing with AI and emotional intelligence and finances. Where are we going? What's going to happen to us? So, how to save tax money, and also customer service. I have people in there who run service businesses. So I've broken it down into those categories. I have 8 speakers a year. I'm looking for the best. I can go online and find out who has 5s and who has 4 9s and what the response is. And then I'll call the other chairs and say, what was this like? How did it work? I'm looking for more interactive rather than just a speaker that speaks for 2 hours. So I'm making sure that they don't get bored and it's not just a speaker. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at. And I ask them a lot, where are we going? How do we do? I mean, I review this at the end. The best speakers, I got to tell you, there's so many great speakers. I can't pick out one. We had an emotional intelligence speaker. We had someone talking about how to listen better. We talked to somebody about accountability, and I thought that was good because we talked about team accountability and how important that is. We had somebody from the Blue Angels talk about how they debrief at the end and how it's more important than basically training, because training you learn, and when you do something and make a mistake, debriefing is better. I had the guy who marketed a long time ago Red Lobster and the Darden Group and how that marketing was done. So each speaker comes, if they're not top rated and people from other groups don't like them, I normally don't get them. So I've had just top speakers come in. And by the way, if I always tell the members, if you don't like the speaker, we'll throw them out.
Yep. What's so you're, as a chair, you're not only running the meetings, but you're also, you're basically the business coach for all of your members. What's your coaching style like, and how did you develop that?
The coaching style was developed basically by being a consultant to radio stations. My office was located in New York, and if you were to travel to the South or the Midwest, they don't like New Yorkers. So
I am a New Yorker, and I can vouch for that.
and you would go to different places, and they would dress differently, and I would say, I'd wear a suit. Most people in the South didn't wear a suit. Most people in the Midwest didn't wear a suit. If I go to the West, you're lucky that they even had a suit, and if they were even on time. So I picked up all these things, and as I would travel, I realized that the first thing that when I would walk in, it goes, they hated me immediately because I'm about to change things. So I learned the art of questions, and questions really helped me out. I don't know, I'm not sure. What do you see that I'm not seeing? How do we work together on this? And the questions really helped me become a better chair and a better coach. So my coaching is really about the art of questions, the art of processing. What do you trust? What's your process now? Most time, here's the things I've noticed. The mindset is bad. You walk in and, we're about to lose, and so they think that way. The other one is nobody has time to fix anything, so time management is an issue. The other thing is no one's really clear on what they expect from people. So I picked that up as I was going along, and as I bought my own radio stations after that, I learned I gotta remember everything I did on the road and how do I get it better. And what I would do is I would ask a question and I would ask them to do the work. So I would delegate the work with them and see how they interpret what they heard from me. So that's the kind of coach I am, and that's what I do right now in my one-on-ones. After the meeting, it's real easy because they talk about what decisions, what opportunities they have, and they talk about some of the things that are going wrong. And my job is to go in and says, what have you done about it? How can we help with it? How much time are you losing on this? The issue I have is that I'm an advice monster, and I have to quash that because I have so much advice.
I was going to ask because I've had a few chairs tell me that they actually had to change the way that they go about doing one-on-ones with members as a Vistage chair because it's so easy to get into that mode of like, well, why don't you just do this? Just do this. And that's not the Vistage style. It was that difficult to adapt to?
Well, it's still difficult to adapt because I listen to them. So it still is.
It remains
I've
difficult.
switched it around into a question. I said, you may not like what I'm about to say, but what if we did this? How do you see that working? So I've tried to do that because I don't want them to walk out there and go, what a waste of time that was.
Right. No, absolutely. If you can share without violating any confidentiality, well, what's the toughest issue that you've processed in one of your groups recently?
I think the fact that they're all high D's drivers, they're all driven to win. The issues always have been, are they coaching their staff? Do they communicate well? And are they tracking what they expect from people? Those issues seem to come up over and over and over again. And right now, the conversation is about hiring. I think, HR was invented in the 50s. We're still doing the same way we used to do with how do we hire people, what kind of plans we put together, what do we expect from people. And I've had a couple speakers come in who are trying to change HR, and I don't know if the leaders are willing to do it yet. Because so even though they're in their 30s and 40s, they'll be complaining about the next generation under them. They're so lazy. Right. They don't want to work. They want to work at home. They don't want, so it's a constant conversation. And my conversation back to them, it's not them, it's you. So let's talk about you.
As the father of several of that generation, I know that's exactly right. And you look at it and you're and they are very different than what was considered normal when I was coming up in the corporate business thing. And the kids that are coming up now are growing up very differently than my generation did, certainly. And I think that they're very different. And I think it's going to be a really interesting next 10 years or so as these folks kind of take over the workplace.
You've talked to a lot of Vistage chairs. Is the topics I'm talking about the same, or is there more unique depending on the part of the country?
One thing that I found that has surprised me is that I know a lot in Colorado where I live now, but the things that we talk about are very similar to the things that you talk about and that I've heard other people talking about. There's, I think, a lot of uncertainty right now is probably the way that I would describe it. I think that there's a lot of economic uncertainty. I think that there's a lot of uncertainty of what work is going to look like in the next 10 years, now with this very sudden and aggressive adoption of AI. We've got we've got the Zoomers coming up into the workplace. I think there's just like a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of people are looking around and thinking like they don't know where to start.
I think an AI is going to be a game changer. I think if used properly, it probably could move our system faster. I know I'm using it. I have people younger than me who haven't even looked at it yet. And they said, "You're using it?" I said, "It's the best thing in the world. I mean, it's great." I had a friend of mine who had a legal problem. He went to AI, wrote a letter, and sent it to the guy, and he says, "I didn't have to hire a lawyer, and everything was solved."
AI is going to, I think, do a lot of remarkable things. I mean, and it's still in its infancy, and I know that there's a lot of things that we're all doing wrong, but it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, certainly. What if you thinking about the kinds of advice and the kinds of experience shares that you hear in your group, and whether it's from a speaker, from a member, you talking to a member, what's that like really sticky piece of advice that you've heard that you would, I just would love to tell myself that if I could go back to me, back in the Larry King or Jay Leno days, this is what I would want to tell myself?
If I was to go back in those days, I don't think I was crystal clear. I don't think that I tracked, and I don't think that I did a very good job of debriefing after the end. And what I see now is that I work with non-Vistage guys too because I'm coaching them, and I see a massive turnaround. The leader was, in my mind, disconnected. Yeah, this is what we want to get done. I'll give it to my manager. The manager will do it. And it was like almost telephone. And that's what I noticed. Plus, here's big deal. A lot of people don't have processes.
Right.
People don't know how to run meetings.
Nope.
People don't know what the daily huddles are in the morning. They just don't do it. I would say, how do you get an A at the end of the day? Now, I got to tell you that when I ran another radio station in town, not here, in another city, I hired a gentleman named Edward Deming. And Edward Deming taught us about all this stuff, which I did not know. And it was just fascinating because I couldn't afford him totally. So the university in Wichita, which Friends University and our radio station, hired him jointly, and he taught us via this antiquated way of communicating, which was not Zoom, it was another way on a TV. But I got to tell you that really changed the culture of the radio station, and by then we didn't use culture, and it changed everything that we did. And we were much more focused on better communications. We would have to give you an example, he would say you have to track stuff and you have to look at things. So we would have a sales meeting for 15 minutes, 10 minutes every single day except Thursday. And I would track things. And I found out Thursday was the worst sales day of the week, even though the salespeople didn't want to have a sales meeting every single day, is because we really helped each other. We really brainstormed because the sales meeting was more about, okay, who had a challenge? Who has an obstacle? What can't you get done? How do we do that? And we'd focus on one client or one salesperson, and we'd help each other. On Thursday, one thing about the Midwest, they come to the work early. They came in at 7:30, so we started meetings at 7:30. So on Thursday, people would show up at 8, 8:30, 9, whatever time, or I didn't see them at all. And that was the worst sales day. So that was a lesson learned if I were to go back. And I tell her, you got to have a process. You got to have a daily huddle in the morning. They got to know where they're going, and they got to learn how to get an A at the end of the day.
That's really, really solid advice, and I can wholeheartedly agree with everything that you just said. If you met somebody today that was telling you, oh, you're involved with this Vistage thing. I've been thinking about joining a peer group. I'm a CEO. I'm a founder. I'm an entrepreneur. What advice would you give that person who hasn't had the peer group experience yet, but is interested?
I don't give advice. I normally ask a lot of questions. I'll say,
Right.
What made you interested, and what do you know about Vistage? And why would you want to get better? And who holds you accountable now? And what kind of what are you looking at? And then I want to get into more about them and about their background. So, for instance, I'm talking with a new person just now. He's a PI lawyer. The guys who run after the traffic cops and things like that. And he says, listen, I want to join Vistage. And I said, well, hold on, I just can't join Vistage. I said, I need to know a lot about what you're up against, what keeps you up at night. And I said, I hate that phrase, but let's talk about things that stress you out, things that help you, that are bothering you. And it has to do with things like personal stuff, business stuff, and also your health. I want to know all about that. That opens a rich conversation. But if I was to end it, I asked them, I said, I'd like you to talk to some of my members. And I'd like you to ask this question. You can ask any question you want, but this is the question. If you were to do it all over again and join Vistage Chet's group, would you do it? Start from that area and then dig deeper into that. And if you need some questions, I'll help you. How do you deal with your time, and things like that? I said, I'll help you with that. And then then I ended with, I don't know if you ever had a board of directors, but Vistage is like a peer group of seasoned CEOs that become your board of directors and hold you accountable. Are you willing to get into a group like that?
That's an excellent question. Chet, it's been like a real pleasure. I can't tell you. This has been so nice chatting with you. What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they're interested in you, they're interested in your group, they want to talk? What's the best way to get your attention?
Well, my email is the best because I check it all the time. And it's CTART at VistageFlorida.com. CTart at VistageFlorida.com. And by the way, you can't forget that name because everyone I call, whether it be a doctor's office or whether it be something, they go, that's a great name. You should be.
It's a very punchy name.
You should be in Hollywood. I said, well, it goes by too fast. But it's interesting because I didn't like it as a kid, and now it's like people remember it.
Well, the memorable Chet Tart, thank you for being my guest. I really appreciate you, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate the time and I appreciate the questions. You were well prepared. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Chairwaves. You can subscribe to our feed using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your platform of choice. You can also visit chairwaves.com for more information. Chairwaves is hosted and produced by me, Eric Wolf, and to connect with me, you can visit my website at ewolf.live. That's EWOLF.live. And a disclaimer, while I love Vistage and CEO peer groups, this podcast is not owned by or affiliated with Vistage or any other peer organization. Thanks for listening.